Hi, I'm Kimmy with On William Street, and we are here to help you become a more confident quilter, from the piecing to the quilting and everything in between. So this week, we are going to learn a fun new free motion quilting motif. So each month this year, I am teaching you a free motion quilting motif that I like to use in my quilting to help you become more confident in finishing your quilts. So to quilt these up, we are going to be using some little mini practice sandwiches. Mine, I have my top cut at about 12 inches and my backing is cut at about 14 inches, just to give a little bit of extra so you can hang on to that as you're moving around. It doesn't need to be anything fancy. Grab some scraps. If you do have some solid scraps, I definitely recommend practicing on solids, because that's going to help you see your stitches better, so you kind of know what you need to work on, what you need to practice, and what you need to get better at. And then also your batting can just be scraps. It doesn't really matter what kind of batting you have here, anything you have left over to make these quilt practice sandwiches. So don't forget, everything that we're going to talk about and everything I'm going to show you, I will have also directions written out in our blog post. So I'm going to link that in the description below the video, so you can head over to our website, check out our blog post, see diagrams, and see everything that we're going to go over today. Also, while you're there, you can check out our shop where we have all sorts of fun modern quilting patterns for you. So don't forget to check that out and see what you can find. So today, the motif that we're going to learn is a little bit of a variation on like a loop, but we're going to do it in a little bit more of an organized manner to kind of give some fun loopy rows across the quilt. So first, let's go ahead and grab our sketchbook and something to draw with, and we're going to sketch it out. So whenever I'm learning a new free motion quilting motif, I always like to sketch it out first. And you can use regular scratch paper, copy paper, you can get a sketchbook, you can get just like a notebook, a lined notebook works. So it doesn't have to be anything expensive. It is kind of nice having it either in like a notebook or a sketchbook if you're okay with that, as opposed to just like on scratch paper, because then you can always keep it. And it kind of makes this diary of free motion quilting motifs that you know, so that when you're trying to figure out how you want to quilt something, you can always go back and look through that for ideas. So first thing we're going to do with our variation on our loop is we're going to go ahead and just work it in a row across. So you're going to come up, make your first loop, and then we're just going to come down straight across and make a second loop. Go up, make a loop, come back down, and you can see you're going back around. You are kind of tracing over previous stitch lines. Don't stress it too much. Try to hit them, as close as you can, but don't stress too much if you don't. This is not something I'm going to go back through and unpick if I don't hit that line perfectly. And the more you practice, the better you'll get at being able to stitch over your lines. And if you've got a matching thread, it's not going to stand out and be that big of a deal anyway if you don't hit it perfectly. So just back and forth. So these ones you can see that they're all roughly the same size, right? We're trying to keep those relatively even, and you can definitely do that. It works really well in like sashing or a border, and you can keep those all the same size. If you're doing it as an all over or filling a background space, you can also vary those. So we're going to come up here and we're going to do the length in between different. So some are going to be closer, some are going to be farther. And it's going to be more random across the quilt top. Now what I'm going to do one more here. So now what I'm going to do is, if I'm doing this as an all over or background fill, I'm going to come back in here. And I'm going to make these kind of reach up and fit those spaces. So if I have one that goes up farther, I'm going to bring my dot up farther to meet that. And again, I'm going to vary the widths and the direction that they go. And then the next row, same thing, I'm going to kind of bring it in so that it comes up and fills in those spaces. And you get a nice even distribution of quilting around the entire quilt. The thing you want to watch for here is just keeping even spacing. If you keep relatively the same space in between everything, in between here, in between the lines as they come together. It's gonna give a really nice all over texture, and you're not gonna see the individual parts so much. You're just gonna see the fun motif all over across the whole quilt. So now let's go ahead and stitch it out. So you may notice here, I am quilting with a black thread on a very light green fabric. This is not a normal combination I would make normally. I'm going to have my thread blend a little bit more. This is simply so that you can see what I'm doing. And also, like I said, when you quilt, I like to use practice. I like to use solids. Just like that, I like to use a contrasting thread when I'm practicing, because that's going to make it so I can see what I'm stitching better. And so you know what you need to work on and what you need to practice more. If you're actually quilting a quilt, especially if you're new and you're worried about those stitches showing, use a thread that's going to blend, and then you're not going to see the mistakes, and it's going to look a lot better in the end. As you get better, you can definitely use contrasting thread if you want that fabric, that quilting, to stand out and not blend in with the fabric, if that's one of the design choices that you're making. So don't get worried, don't stress too much over how much my stitching stands out, because yours would likely not be that obvious. Whenever I quilt, I'm always going to pull the bottom thread to the top first, and then I like to hold them out of the way and take a couple of stitches in place, and now I don't need to worry about those. In a moment, I'm going to go ahead and pull them out of the way a little bit more. So for this motif, like I said, it's really just a variation on a loop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up, see, and now you can see I can get those out of the way, move those. And when I get to the top here, I'm going to go ahead and make a full circle. Then I'm going to come down here and just make another circle. Loop back up and keep going. So a couple of things, if you feel like you're having a hard time getting them to be smooth, try going a little bit faster. If you have a little bit of a smaller stitch length, or it's going a little bit faster, sometimes it moves a little bit easier. And then also you're going to want to stop whenever you're free motion quilting, and just check your tension. You can see my tension is a little bit off here. I need to tighten my top tension a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and take a moment to check and do that, because you wouldn't want to have to deal with all of that nasty tension on a final piece. So make sure you're working on keeping an eye on that. And there we finished the row out across. So then, like I said, we can definitely vary the sizes and the width so that it kind of fits together in an all over pattern. And also something to keep in mind, if I was doing this just across the width of a quilt, I would work my fabric this way. So I'm gonna actually come in and show you how to stitch it vertical. Because if I can just work my fabric back and forth this way, it's a lot easier than trying to maneuver it into the side of your machine, especially when you have limited throat space. So I'm gonna show you. So now that I have got my first row in, my second row is going to come down here. And it's just going to tuck up and in those spaces. And you can see how it's kind of giving this fun all over texture, and then the next row you would just come back in and tuck it up and in there as well. So don't forget, as we're quilting, we want to kind of practice these in multiple directions, so we can practice them back and forth. You can also practice going backwards. So we're going to quilt it from this direction. And that's just going to make it so that when you actually get to the quilt, whatever direction you need to put your quilting motif, you're going to be able to quilt it that way without having to worry about spinning and twisting your quilt around, which sometimes can be very, very difficult. If you have a big quilt, to have to be able to maneuver it a certain way, you want to be able to quilt in any direction so that you're not having to worry about maneuvering that quilt very much. As a border, I want to kind of show you how I'm going to fit it into the border. So this is a permanent marker. Don't mark your fabric up with a permanent marker, but we're just going to do it so you can see it. So what I want to do is I want this one to come around and end here, just before the corner, so that I can come up and make a nice big loop here, and then bring it out of the loop and come back and make another loop down here. So I'm going to mark that out. I would definitely, sometimes I do mark those in those corners to make sure it fits right, but I'm going to use something that's going to come out later. And then we're going to come down here and just stitch the motif. Keeping an eye on that corner, knowing that I want to make sure that I'm hitting that where I want to hit it. So I'm going to adjust my design just a little bit to fit that. Now I can come out here and do my big loop to fill the corner. And then come back down. And carry on. So that is one way you can kind of approach those corner designs. And like I said, if you're not confident that you're going to be able to hit it just like you want or to get that right motif, definitely go ahead and grab yourself some marking pens and draw that in there. And then you can erase the marking pens when you're all done to kind of give you a little bit of extra confidence with that. So grab your quilt sandwich. Like I said, remember it can be scrap fabric. You can throw, if you have quilt sandwiches you made, you can throw some fabric on top of it and do it again. Use it a second or third time. Grab your sketchbook, sketch out these designs first, get comfortable with the design, and then take it to your sewing machine and then go ahead and stitch it up and see what you can come up with. And one thing really to remember with free motion quilting is be patient with yourself. It does take time, it does take practice. So don't expect perfection immediately, but you will get better the more you do it. So again, don't forget you have everything that we've talked about is in the blog post. So we've got that link underneath the video, so don't forget to check that out. And head to our shop to find your fun next modern quilting project. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. You can also find us on Instagram and Facebook, or subscribe to our mailing list and get access to our subscriber library, which is full of fun projects and guides as well. We'll see you next week.